Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue reacting to Andrew Callaghan's apology, his response to the allegations that he sexually assaulted a number of women. Let's watch.
But, I think I want to have a more nuanced and important conversation about power dynamics, pressure, and coercion. Because, like I said, I think for a long time, I was behaving in a way that I actually thought was normal. I thought that, going home from the bar alone made you a loser. I thought that persistence was a form of flattery.
So all this could be true. All of this will play into coercive victimization of individuals, particularly women, because men are taught that they're a loser if they don't go home with someone or they don't bag the babe, if you will, and that they should never take no for an answer. But the allegations are far, far beyond the threshold of what I would call incompetent, young, immature boys not knowing how to behave in a public space with women. Like, that's not what what we're hearing from the victim. So what we're hearing from the victim is repeated, fairly sophisticated systems of pressuring people, stalking people, forcing themselves on people after they've repeatedly, in a sober environment, said, no, I don't want to, no. Especially that last account that we heard. I mean, for him to frame it as the way he's framing it is, yikes.
I thought that, if at first somebody was reluctant, they're playing hard to get, just try harder. And if you think someone's feeling you, make a physical advance and see if they go with it. And I think that, especially I realized when so many young people, especially young men, rushed to defend me when this stuff first started coming out, that this type of sex pest behavior is normalized. And a lot of people think this stuff is normal when I don't think that it is. And I think that I want to be fully responsible for not having a fluid understanding of consent and what enthusiastic two-way consent looks like.
Okay, I don't know if I'm just being convinced by his mastery of the internet, but that sounds better. That sounds more encouraging. Earlier he said, I want to be clear, I've always taken no as a no. That is not what the victims are saying. So everything hinges on that. If he can't admit that he has a problem with accepting no, or, this is total speculation, if he can't admit that he actually gets pleasure from putting people in situations where they will say no, and then he continues to pressure and scare them, then we're not in a zone of any kind of accountability yet, if we believe the victims.
That being said, a lot of the things that have been said online about me are not true. A lot of things are missing really important contextual information that I think would change people's interpretation of a lot of these situations, but I'm not.
Yeah, I'm sure that if we had the full story, that it would be a little different. But I have a hard time, and I've been down this road many times with many people in my office, both perpetrators and victims. And of course, as a member of our society, I've certainly seen a lot of different public accounts come out. And I would have a hard time believing that if we were there somehow witnessing what was happening, that there would be other details that would exonerate him. Maybe there's a couple details, like he might say, well, that woman at the time, she actually kissed me at first, and she left that out completely. Might there be something like that? Sure. But that doesn't negate everything that happened after that point, right? Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but he's saying that there are other details that were left out. Sure. But it's hard to imagine that there would be any detail that would mitigate what he did.
I'm not here to invalidate anybody's lived experience. If you feel pressured, that's just what it is. I hope that young people, and young men in particular, can use my mistakes to learn and move through life with a better understanding of consent. As far as what I have planned, I'm not really sure what comes next.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's saying a lot of good things, but it lacks substance. It lacks a foundation. It lacks a true acknowledgement of what he has done. It's just fast. I don't think I've ever heard such a, so if the allegations are true, I don't think I've ever heard such a savvy response, because I could absolutely see people being convinced, particularly his fan base. If you're not a fan of his, you don't care. You're just someone like, oh, I never liked him, or I didn't know him. He's been outed. Fine, cancel. But if you're a fan, you're wanting some excuse to continue to be a fan, because not only do you want to consume his content, which has a social value from what I understand. I don't know, but the little bit I have seen of his content, there is social value to it. He does out people that should be outed. He does educate the public in what our society, different cultural movements within our society that are concerning, and his politics seem to be on the right side of history. Don't quote me on that, obviously. I've only seen a few of his videos, but you could imagine being a fan of that and really depending on him to go out there and out those individuals in the style that he does. And you want to continue to enjoy that. You want to continue to support that movement that he is a part of. You could also imagine, and this is a cognitive bias that we have, that once we lock in on a reality, once we believe something to be true, when we hear opposing data, our first reaction is almost always to reject that. So if you're a fan of Andrew Callaghan, not only do you believe something to be true and will initially reject information to the contrary, but again, you might also really need him to be doing what he's doing, because he is, for some people, fighting the good fight out there. So it's potentially extremely savvy what he's doing in this video, because if you were looking for an excuse to like him, he's serving it up on a platter.
I mean, obviously, reporting is my one true love, and I'm 25 years old, and I have my whole life ahead of me. But I really think that I need to do some serious work on myself and figure myself out. So
maybe he will. I can't know. I don't hear evidence of that. And it would make sense that prior to doing that work, he might not have the awarenesses that he will later. So if he legit engages in that, in therapy, would be with someone who is a specialist in this area, by the way, then absolutely. I've treated predators. I've had them develop those awarenesses and change their behavior. So it could happen. It takes a long time, and it's not without its bumps in the road, but it is possible. Sometimes people will say this when they actually don't intend on changing, or they even go to treatment and they will laugh on the inside at the therapist the whole time while tricking the therapist. Psychopaths will do that at times, not always. So who knows? But I don't know, maybe he legit will change. But I would say that if I heard this, say I received a police report along the lines of the allegations against Andrew Callaghan is coming to me voluntarily or court mandated to be in therapy with me, and I heard this and it was legit, I would actually be encouraged. I would wonder if I'm being played, if I'm being tricked and manipulated, of course, but I would be encouraged by what I'm hearing. I wouldn't say we're done. I would say this is a great start. We have a lot of road to cover in the next number of years, because what we want to get to eventually is for the individual we would want the individual to express authentic remorse about what they have done to other people. Now, some people lack the capacity for that, so that's a whole other topic, and there's a whole other treatment road to go down with those individuals. Essentially, you have to convince the individual that it's within their best interest not to harm other people. And I have worked with psychopaths to good effect, and I'm not the only one, obviously. There are many people in my field who have. So it's hard, and it requires the individual to want to change, but it can be done. Because if you have psychopathic personality disorder, if you have a lack of empathy that is inherent to your personality, that is very unlikely to change. So you have to work around it. You have to develop ways of telling yourself, look, I know I don't care about other people's feelings, but it doesn't serve my interest to actually harm that individual, because eventually it'll come back around and I'll be harmed because they will out me or they'll call the police or something. So it's within my best interest actually not to harm them. Even though I don't care about harming them, I do care about me, and so I have to coach myself and constantly remind myself. It's sort of like an addiction in a sense. It's not an addiction, but it is along those lines of where you're reminding yourself of these consequences that may or may not even happen further down the road, and modifying your behavior in the present. So there's that. And again, I'm not diagnosing him. I obviously have no idea. But if he legit gets help, then maybe he will get better. He might still, if the allegations are true, he might still be worthy of being canceled even if he does change, right?
I really think that I need to do some serious work on myself and figure myself out. So I'm going to start therapy sessions pretty much immediately. Also, not to blame alcohol, but I truly believe that alcohol was a contributing factor to my poor decision making.
Yeah, and that's been demonstrated for people who perpetrate these kinds of crimes. Alcohol often will be a factor. It's not the cause, because there are plenty of people who are drinking frequently and they never even come close to what he is doing. So it is a factor in these individuals doing these sort of things. So I want to talk about something that's been rattling around in my head. I don't know about him, but I'll tell you a fictional story about someone else that I'm making up right now. This individual was born with a difference in their brain, in that their amygdala or their fear response was not as robust. It was far below average, meaning that the infant, the young child, does not have as much fear as other people do. So on one hand, you might think, oh, that's kind of a superpower. You don't get afraid very often. As someone myself who suffers from anxiety at times, that would be great. If I could just turn down my fear response, it'd be nice. You know, when I'm laying there in the dark at night trying to fall asleep and my mind starts racing, it'd be nice not to have fears about things. So it can sound like a superpower, but it actually can, and the model of psychopathy, the model of developing antisocial personality, one of the models is that some of these individuals are born this way. They don't have the same capacity of experiencing fear as other people do. And one of the effects that can result from that is that when you are being parented and when you're living in the world, one of the things that happens is that you will do things impulsively. You'll throw a rock or you will get close to traffic and your caregivers or other people will freak out, right? There are different ways that caregivers will react, right? Small reactions, like if you're not picking up your toys, your parent might be like, hey, I really need you to pick up your toys. But if you're walking out into the street or you have a big rock and you're about to hit your sibling over the head, caregivers, good caregivers anyway, will react much bigger. They won't just be like, hey, don't hit your sibling over the head with a rock. No, parents will flip. They'll be, they'll scream. No. And when we do that as caregivers, that will have a lot of different effects. It alerts the child that has the rock. But it also produces a fair amount of fear in the child. Now, we don't want to make children feel afraid because that can be abusive, obviously. But a little bit of fear actually, according to this model, will help children to learn where the line is. So they pick up a rock and they impulsively, they're just curious. There's I want to bonk this other kid over the head with this rock. The kid's, 2.5 or something. And someone, oh no. And a kid with a normal sense of fear will go, oh, and a shock goes through them. It's like, oh, what's happening? And what that does is it alerts the whole body and mind to what I was just about to do is a scary thing. And we're encoded, we evolved to avoid things that we're afraid of. So the child will learn, you could almost say that they learn morality to some extent as a result of this fear response. They do things that cause people to react in big ways. Now, the caregiver doesn't have to hit the child, but if you've ever had a kid and you just raise your voice, you just, like if you react with fear yourself to a child, like if the kid's about to walk out into the street and you have you get a scary feel, oh my God, the kid will stop and stare at you because they're afraid too. They're very enmeshed with our emotions. And so you exhibit fear and the kids, what's happening? And they don't even know why you're afraid because they don't understand traffic. They don't understand cars. But they do know that you are afraid, and thus they are afraid, and thus they need to freeze and stop whatever they're doing. Okay, so I hope I'm exhibiting and role-playing that well enough. And so it's pretty complex, obviously. So say someone is born with a pretty low response to fear, and you have situations where they have an impulse to pick up a rock and hit someone over the head. And they pick up a rock, and they're about to hit someone over the head, and the parents freak out normally, appropriately, and the kid, because they don't feel fear, they just, and they put the rock down and they don't really encode that the behavior should be avoided because they don't have that fear response and thus don't have a reason to avoid that behavior in the future. And so over time, they might continue to have impulses of various different sorts, but some of which actually are harmful to other human beings. Another example is you could take that rock and hit another kid over the head and no one sees it, but the kid sees it, that you hit over the head. The kid kid starts to cry and scream, that will also often induce a fear response in the perpetrator. And that fear response often will contribute to what we might consider our impulse control, our behavioral control, our maturity, and our morality, if you will, that we shouldn't harm others. Now, there's also a lot of research regarding that humans are born with an innate altruistic impulse towards other people, so fear isn't the only factor as we develop morality and altruism and the lack of predation on other human beings. But if you lack fear, then you might not react when other people react against your behavior against other people, and thus you might not be given a chance to learn how to control your behavior. And you might even feel kind of powerful, like you can get away with things. Because for me, for example, when I was a kid, what shaped my behavior was just the possibility that my parents would be disappointed in me. My parents never hit me. They weren't abusive. They didn't yell at me. But I really just didn't want them to be disappointed in me. Same with other authority figures, teachers, this sort of thing. I was afraid of just them feeling bad about me, thinking bad about me. And so that shaped my behavior. If I had no fear, if I wasn't afraid of that, then I might feel free to do whatever I want. And that could involve harming other people, or it could just involve behaving outside of the box, right? You might be willing to get on stage because you don't care about people thinking bad about you. You might feel also completely comfortable walking up to strangers on the street and interviewing them about things that you are trying to humiliate them about. You might feel completely comfortable just walking up to someone on the street saying, hey, tell me about the NRA, or tell me about your points of view, or tell me about how you're pro-gun while they're holding a gun. And you don't care about the consequences, even though these individuals might try to get you later, right? But you don't have fear. It can go a lot of different ways, right? These individuals can both be exploitative of other people, and these people might be able to do things that other people might be envious of. A lot of people might be envious of Andrew Callaghan for his ability just to walk up to people on the street. I couldn't do that. You could. I would be way too nervous. I don't want them to yell at me. I just can't. Well, maybe in my older age I might be able to, but not when I was younger. So for this fictional individual, it's possible that the same difference in your personality might lead to you having a very successful career as a YouTuber who walks up to people on the street and interviews them. That same personality trait also results in you not having empathy for other people. Maybe even you get a kick out of bothering other people and harming other people, making other people suffer. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
And I think that alcohol in general has had a devastating impact on my life. So I think I'm going to make the decision to join the 12-step program for Alcoholics Anonymous. And during this journey into sobriety, I want to take a serious step back from public life. And like I said, figure myself out.
Okay, that's good. Proof's in the pudding. And this could be the beginning of a journey for him. But I don't know. If I heard him say, you know what, I've been thinking about this for a long time. The allegations just hit a crescendo recently. The allegations have been coming out a long time, even before I was known on the internet. And I've always known there was something wrong with me. Or if he said something like that, that would lend itself more toward credibility or believability or a positive prognosis. But he's acting like these allegations are bewildering to him. He's just like, well, yeah, I think I have a lot to learn. You have a lot. I think everyone understands what you did was a crime. It's not just misconduct. What he did were crimes.
And I hope that this reaches the ears of anyone who's felt affected by me. I'd love to reach out to you, or you can reach out to me, even just for me to say, I'm sorry, and I really apologize, and I appreciate you all. I also want to apologize to my closest collaborators, my friends, my family, and people who will have to wear this stain on their career forever. You guys don't deserve this, and I love you guys. That being said, if you never want to watch Channel 5 again, I understand. I hope you remember the missions of radical empathy and media literacy that we have tried to put into the world through our...
So for some people, they'll have a hard time reconciling two seemingly opposing ideas, that someone could do good in the world and actually want to do good in the world, while also behind the scenes being a predator. Bill Cosby is a prime example of this. Bill Cosby legitimately and objectively did a lot of good in society. I could list all the things, but you could just look him up. It's clear that he went completely out of his way and sacrificed potentially some of his career or put it at risk by pushing back against the privileged white world. So Bill Cosby did a lot of good and a lot of other things in addition to that. And according to the allegations, which sound extremely credible, he was behind the scenes drugging people to sleep and assaulting them sexually while they were incapacitated and then intimidating them afterwards to keep them silent. It is monstrous what he did. I mean, it's like if you made a movie about someone like that, I'd be like, come on, that's ridiculous. No one is that much of a monster. How can both of those things exist where he was both a good for society and a monster at the same time? Well, the easiest answer that people will land on is, well, obviously he was just doing all those good things because he was trying to make up for the bad things, or it was a smoke screen so that he could get away with the bad things. And that could be true. But it's also possible and really hard for people to wrap their mind around that there could be multiple aspects to someone's personality. They can be both a monster and they can have legit, authentic motivations and goals in life to help other people. There's no way to objectively know if it's authentic or not, or if it's just a ruse to try to trick everyone, but we don't know. So for Andrew Callaghan, he might have been one of those people who legit has motivation and a track record of doing good in the world, according to some people, and behind the scenes also be a monster, allegedly. Those things can exist. And it's just one of those things about psychology and personality that we just have to live with. There's no objective science to this. We can't know for sure why people do what they do. It's confusing and uncomfortable for us to admit that, to have a question mark. We want to put a label down, oh, he's a psychopath, and everything he did must have been psychopathic. Everything he did must have been some grand Machiavellian scheme. That is a comfortable conclusion that I can come to. Yeah, it could be true, but it's also possible that it is extremely complex. Now, do the good deeds justify or outweigh or let him off the hook for the bad deeds? In my book, no. If the allegations are true, I don't care what he's done in the world. He is a criminal who should be behind bars, honestly, or should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And I think he might, I could imagine that's probably where he's headed. I mean, the allegations are no joke. These are criminal acts that he has allegedly committed. So he could be looking at prison time. He could be looking at 10, 20 years of prison time. I don't know, but I don't know. Anyway, so I think he's got a little bit more to say here.
Through our coverage. All right, that's all I want to say.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Let me know what you think in the comments or email me by clicking the link below and going to the website, and you can email me from there. That's if you really want to contact me, that's the surest way. I don't always see every comment, just so you know that. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, take care of others, take a deep breath. This is pretty heavy stuff. You might be triggered even if you don't consciously know you're triggered, so make sure you check in with yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.